Revolutionary tactics are shaped by historical experience, and there is perhaps no historical experience more valuable than that of the Bolsheviks. Many tactics were proven by their success, such as the necessity of a principled proletarian party, yet one is often overlooked. Elections were shown to be a powerful tool for the preparation of revolution when pursued by a truly revolutionary party, making Engels seem significantly less foolish for his 1895 stance. Though it may be shocking to hear that revolution, something which aims to topple the state, could be aided by working within it, the success of the Bolsheviks reveals this to be true. Despite lacking the flashy aesthetic of illegal struggle, such as organizing workers' councils, legal struggle served a very important role in reaching the masses with propaganda. Revolutionaries could be distinguished from opportunists in how they approached issues the people faced. With these capable leaders established, the masses could be prepared for revolution when it may otherwise be difficult to organize them. Additionally, demographics provided by elections helped guide action, both before and after revolution. Evidence of the benefits of electoral struggle can be found oozing throughout the works of Lenin, who reinforced the already firm findings of Engels. Following the defeat of the Paris Commune, Engels observed a new tactic of class warfare develop, one far better suited for modern conditions established by capitalism. Louis Bonaparte's empire fell along with the beaten and battered communards, leaving a power vacuum filled by a rapidly industrializing Germany. This industrialization immensely expanded the German proletariat, shifting the center of the working class movement from France to Germany. As Engels stated in his 1895 introduction to Marx's class struggles in France, these German workers
supplied their comrades in all countries with a new weapon, and one of the most potent, when they showed them how to make use of universal suffrage.
Waging war through a peaceful veil, electoralism helped avoid the greatest loss experienced by bloodlettings like the Paris Commune, the setback of organized forces. Violence was relegated to the bourgeoisie, who were bound to break civility when workers' power became too much to bear. This allowed proletarian organization to progress without interruption, ensuring the most potent strength possible when the time for action came. Sadly, the German Social Democratic Party which set this example would prove undisciplined, ultimately betraying the workers they claimed to serve. But electoralism's value was shown by another. From their humble beginnings as a faction within the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party, or RSDLP, to their independence as a separate party, the Bolsheviks took note of electoralism's strength, utilizing it whenever necessary. As Lenin expressed in left-wing communism and infantile disorder, this tool was considered crucial to the success of their revolution, stating,
"We Bolsheviks participated in the most counter-revolutionary parliaments, and experience has shown that this participation was not only useful, but indispensable to the party of the revolutionary proletariat after the first bourgeois revolution of 1905 in Russia, so as to pave the way for the second bourgeois revolution of February 1917, and then for the socialist revolution of October 1917.
Ironically, by working within it, communists could show the masses why the bourgeois state had to be done away with. For Lenin, participation in the bourgeois state was not based on some idealistic illusion that society could somehow be changed, as the opportunists he rebuked put it, peacefully and validly through elections. As we demonstrated in the video Voting in Communism, such a position is hopeless at best and actively harmful at worst. Instead, revolutionary parliamentarism, as Lenin called it, was based on the reality that participation in elections was not yet obsolete simply because it was still relevant to the masses. Sure, to us communists, the state is purely a tool of class domination, making it seem pointless to try and work within it, but this is not the case for the overwhelming majority who hold a view shaped by prejudices. Instead of seeing it as the oppressive structure it is, most are of the belief that although flawed, the state does ultimately have their best interests at heart and was created to serve them. For this reason, in Infantile Disorder, Lenin stated that
participation in parliamentary elections and in the struggle on the parliamentary rostrum is obligatory on the party of the revolutionary proletariat, specifically for the purpose of educating the backward strata of its own class and for the purpose of awakening and enlightening the undeveloped, downtrodden, and ignorant rural masses.
The communist who is rightfully disillusioned is not going to pay attention to election campaigns and nominees, but those who maintain some faith in the state will. Elections are where the watchful eyes of this backward strata could be found and shown that their faith is based on prejudices. Lenin's position unsurprisingly echoed that of Engels, who stated that Parliament
provided us with a means, second to none, of getting in touch with the mass of the people where they still stand aloof from us, of forcing all parties to defend their views and actions against our attacks before all the people.
Through participation, parties representing bourgeois interests could be ruthlessly criticized and exposed before the masses to be their true enemies. Due to the class character of bourgeois democracy, parties running for it primarily represent ruling class interests, which can be scrutinized before their potential adherents. Within it, these parties can be shown to be completely incapable of representing the interests of the masses, who may not even know what the real interests are and can be taught of them through proper, powerful propaganda. This is precisely what the Bolsheviks did when pursuing elections. When discussing participation in the elections to the Constituent Assembly, Lenin said they must be approached with intent to
explain to the people the fundamental differences between the three main party divisions, namely 1. The cadets and those to the right of them, 2. The parties of the petty bourgeoisie, Narodniks, and a section of workers who have fallen under the influence of the bourgeoisie, Menshevik defensists, and 3. The party of the revolutionary proletariat, the Bolsheviks.
All other parties besides the Bolsheviks held positions that were demonstrably antithetical to the interests of the proletariat. Each group could clearly be connected to the most pressing matter on the mind of the masses, that of the ongoing imperial conflict, be it the direct interests of the big industrialists or the support offered to them by the opportunists calling it a defensive war for the motherland. The Bolsheviks were able to demonstrate ways in which other groups failed to serve the interests of the masses. In contrast to these groups supporting the mass slaughter of the people, there were the Bolsheviks, which had opposed the war from its very onset, viewing it for what it was, mass sacrifice for the sake of profit. Only they were capable of ending this nightmare, something actively communicated to the masses, such as when Lenin delivered a speech to soldiers saying,
"There is only one way to get out of this frightful war and conclude a truly democratic peace, not imposed by force, and that is by transferring all the state power to the Soviet of Workers and Soldiers' Deputies."
For the tired Russian masses, the party which represented their interests, the only party capable of ending this massive burden, was clear, as the Constituent Assembly election results would reveal. Through rhetoric of this sort, the Russian backward strata was shown to have misplaced their hopes in the bourgeois government, having found a better path forward with the Bolsheviks and the dictatorship of the proletariat. Of course, propaganda of this kind can only be effectively communicated by a party consisting of members who truly represent the interests of the masses. Without principled and authentic revolutionaries to lead the proletariat, the revolutionary sentiment can easily go to waste as it is undirected and vulnerable. Success is impossible without strategy, and strategy requires organization directed by revolutionaries properly equipped to plan a course of action. In short, the successful advancement of the proletariat and its class interests at some point necessitates a party composed of principled and disciplined Marxists. Historically, such parties had to work in a secretive manner, making the development of capable leaders difficult. Lenin found that overcoming this was impossible without participation in bourgeois elections, stating in infantile disorder that
the evolution of good leaders, reliable, tested, and authoritative, is a very difficult matter. These difficulties cannot be successfully overcome without combining legal and illegal work, and without testing the leaders, among other ways, in parliaments.
By overcoming the very real difficulties we all associate with revolutionary proletarian participation in the bourgeois state, revolutionaries show themselves fit for the task of strategizing and scheming, skills further honed by continued participation. In their approach to problems, those truly capable of representing the masses are differentiated from those who aren't. Prior to splitting, there were obviously differences between the Mensheviks and Bolsheviks, but it was ultimately years of conflicting approaches that proved these differences were irreconcilable. Perhaps the earliest indication of this can be seen in the elections to the Second Duma in 1907. The question of coalitions was raised, with the two factions possessing vastly different answers. Lenin, speaking for the Bolsheviks, held the hard line of maintaining an independent platform for the proletariat. In contrast, the Mensheviks fell for petite bourgeois deception, urging for a coalition to combat the forces of reaction. This arrangement favored the cadets, the petite bourgeois liberal party, who only stood to gain support amongst workers at the expense of their autonomy. Lenin's position was rejected in favor of the Mensheviks, and a coalition was entered with the cadets. Ultimately, the Black Hundreds, forces of reaction, pulled significantly lower than the cadets suggested they would, proving that their threat had been greatly exaggerated with the aim of eliminating proletarian opposition. Battles like these would continue up until the Bolsheviks completely severed ties, proving the Mensheviks to be opportunists completely incapable of serving the proletariat and planning the best course of action for their success. Although surely frustrating, working out these problems in advance was necessary for the success of future revolution. In the Constituent Assembly and the dictatorship of the proletariat, Lenin recalls these Bolshevik-Menshevik skirmishes, stating,
That party was defeated in a 15-year struggle which sealed, enlightened, and organized the vanguard of the proletariat, and forged it into a genuine revolutionary vanguard. Furthermore, the first revolution, that of 1905, prepared the subsequent development, determined in a practical way the relations between the two parties, and served as the general rehearsal of the great events of 1917 to 1919.
By fighting to maintain authentic Marxist values, the Bolsheviks revealed the Mensheviks to be the backstabbing petite bourgeois scoundrels they were. It is important to note that electoral activity is not by any means the end-all be-all. Pursuing this form of struggle has a time and place, particularly when revolution remains confined to the distant future. When this is the case, it serves as preparation by building up proletarian armies and the strength and organization that comes with it. All of this work is done for the benefit of future revolution, to provide revolutionary forces with additional support. This being the case, mass action should always be supported by a party whenever it occurs, as it is direct interaction with workers and thus provides an excellent organizational opportunity. In Infantile Disorder, Lenin put it as such:
Action by the masses, a big strike, for instance, is more important than parliamentary activity at all times, and not only during a revolution or in a revolutionary situation.
Because a revolutionary situation is where the bulk of these kinds of actions occur, outside of it there isn't much to do besides engage in electoralism, since the backward strata swells in its absence and requires convincing. Lenin himself understood this and rejected participation in parliament, specifically the First State Duma, when a wave of strikes swept Russia in 1905. At this point, focus on electoralism diverted energy from revolutionary action because electoral forces were completely undeveloped. Although this position was taken, Lenin did not make any reservations on using parliament in the future, saying,
We do not forget that Marx was in favor of an uprising in 1848, whereas in 1850 he condemned the ravings and phrasemongering about an uprising. That before the war of 1870-71, Liebknecht denounced participation in the Reichstag, whereas after the war he participated in it himself. We at once stated in the Proletariat number 12 that it would be ridiculous to renounce for the future all struggle based on a Duma. We know that not only a parliament, but even a travesty of a parliament may, when the conditions for an uprising are lacking, become the focal point of all of our agitation for the entire period when an uprising is out of the question.
When an uprising is not on the horizon, when there is no proletariat growing discontent which needs to be organized, it is best to put energy in developing electoral forces in order to strengthen the uprising when it does come. If an uprising comes and these preparations have not been made, it is entirely pointless and even harmful to give any attention to electoral struggle. In such cases, the best course of action is to focus on organizing revolutionary forces to the best of our ability, and absentation from elections or the abandonment of their pursuit given insufficient legal forces have been developed.
Among the audience, there may be left communists of the Italian variety who feel Bordiga's experience contradicts Bolshevik participation in elections. These Italian left communists can find relief knowing that he did in fact not deviate from the Bolsheviks, instead viewing his faction's abstentionism as justified by the current political climate. In a similar vein to the 1905 Bolshevik rejection of parliamentarism due to the presence of revolutionary mass action, the abstentionist faction believed the situation was ripe for revolution, and all energy had to be diverted towards preparing proletarian dictatorship to replace bourgeois rule. This is apparent in the Theses for the Abstentionist Communist Faction written by Amadeo Bordiga in 1920, which states,
participation in elections to the representative organs of bourgeois democracy and participation in parliamentary activity, while always presenting a continuous danger of deviation, may be utilized for propaganda and for schooling the movement during the period in which there does not yet exist the possibility of overthrowing bourgeois rule, and in which, as a consequence, the party's task is restricted to criticism and opposition.
Unlike the Bolsheviks, the Italian socialists were unable to separate from the social democratic elements in their party, allowing the build-up of opportunist legal forces within the party with no time to build up new ones. Since the Social Democrats proved incapable of leading the proletariat, Bordiga sought to split the party through abstentionism so that a true Marxist party could emerge as a revolutionary vanguard. When writing Infantile Disorder, Lenin half praised this position, stating, quote,
Comrade Bordiga and his group are right in attacking Taradi and his partisans, who remain in a party which has recognized Soviet power in the dictatorship of the proletariat, and yet continue to perform a pernicious and opportunistic policy as members of parliament. Of course, in tolerating this, Comrade Strati and the entire Italian Socialist Party are making a mistake. Such a mistaken, inconsistent, or spineless attitude towards the opportunistic parliamentarian give rise to a left-wing communism, on the other hand, and to a certain extent justifies its existence on the other.
In spite of this, Lenin still denounced the abstentionist faction and advised the continued pursuit of parliament, perhaps not realizing the full extent of the Italian Socialist Party's revisionism.
Although certain conditions may demand the abandonment of electoral struggle to direct all energy into revolutionary organizing and the illegal struggle associated with it, The Bolsheviks show proper preparation should be taken to avoid this outcome, as participation can yield results valuable even after the initial revolution's success. With hindsight, the results of the elections to the Constituent Assembly revealed the obstacles that had to be overcome, laying out a map for visualizing where the Bolsheviks had the least and the most support. As Lenin said in his writings on the Constituent Assembly, this map showed areas where the White Army and its leaders, Kolchak and Denikin, would gain the firmest grounds.
It was precisely in the districts where the Bolsheviks polled the lowest percentage of votes in November 1970 that the counter-revolutionary movement, the revolts, and the organization of counter-revolutionary forces had the greatest success. It was precisely in those districts that the rule of Kolchak and Denikin lasted for months and months.
Beyond just showcasing areas of counter-revolution, the results also provided insight on how to satisfy the populations of these areas and get them to support the Bolsheviks. In the little-known area of Ukraine, the Ukrainian socialist revolutionaries polled significantly more votes than their Russian counterparts, exhibiting that the population had a preference towards independence. This effectively settled the question of the region's self-determination, as allowing it would show the Ukrainian peasantry that the Soviets were the best choice for their interests. Ignoring issues of this sort was regarded by Lenin to be incredibly dangerous, stating that,
To attempt to settle this question in advance, once and for all, firmly and irrevocably, with the narrow-mindedness or sheer stupidity.
Even if the aforementioned benefits did not exist, historically, legal struggle still at the very least held statistical value. In his notorious work Origin of the Family, Engels compared universal suffrage to a sort of gauge that measured the political maturity of the masses. Elections reflect the sentiment of the people and could show how ready for change they were. Engels expanded on this in his 1895 Introduction to Class Struggles in France, stating,
If universal suffrage had offered us no other advantage than that it allowed us to count the numbers every 3 years, that by the regularly established, unexpectedly rapid rise in our vote, it increased in equal measure the vocal certainty of victory and dismay of their opponents, and so became our best means of propaganda, that it accurately informed us of our own strength and that of all opposing parties, and thereby provided us with a measure of proportion second to none for our actions, safeguarding us from the untimely timidity as much as from our untimely foolhardiness. This had been the only advantage we gained from the suffrage. It would still have been much more than enough.
The SPD was the basis of this assessment. Every election year, the party could see the amount of support from people in every constituency, principality, duchy, kingdom, and the empire at large. By measuring the strength of the movement, action could be taken with confidence. When speaking to the RSDLP members elected to the new democratic body established following the 1905 revolution, Lenin echoed this benefit recognized by Engels, stating,
Our task is not to support Cadet Duma, but to use the conflicts within this Duma, or connected to it, for choosing the right moment to attack the enemy, the right moment for an insurrection against the autocracy. As a means of testing public opinion and defining as correctly and precisely as possible the moment when boiling point is reached.
Although written before the Bolsheviks completely split off from the RSDLP, these words foretold how the party would handle later events. In 1917, they were a party of 200,000, which had recently ballooned to this height from 20,000 the previous year due to the fall of the Tsarist terror state. In a country of 160 million, this looks tiny, yet when elections were held, they placed second place with almost a quarter of the popular vote. Shortly after the Constituent Assembly was established, the Bolsheviks confidently dissolved it, declaring all power to the Soviets, knowing they were supported where it mattered most. As communists, it is important to learn lessons provided by history in order to see how to best ensure revolution's success. Failure to do so risks repeating mistakes of the past, resulting in setbacks we cannot afford given the current situation. Electoralism is one of these lessons, with historical experience showing right and wrong ways to do it. Although its pursuit resulted in the betrayal of the SPD, the Bolsheviks demonstrated that this tactic can yield promising results. Through electoral struggle, the Bolsheviks were able to disseminate propaganda among people they may not have been able to reach. Without it, the Bolsheviks may not have been able to see the irredeemably opportunist character of the Mensheviks. Participation in parliament also gave the Bolsheviks invaluable information to shape plans with both before and after the October Revolution. Perhaps all of this could have been achieved without elections, but it is undeniable that they significantly contributed to these achievements.